Sway in the morning. Shade 45. Wow. I often talk about my entry into this phenomenon, this culture called hip hop. In a lot of ways, started from a couple of different reasons. Number one, there was a radio station called KPOO in San Francisco. I'm feeling the applause this morning, Wonder. That's where I'm at. And a guy by the name of Marcus Clemens and a DJ by the name of KK used to play music as I tuned in on the AM transistor radio from my mother's home in my bedroom. And I would hear about these different artists, Sequence, Treacherous 3, Jimmy Spicer, Count Cool Out, all these folks that were from a foreign place called New York and was making this music that really appealed to my heart. And I thought, wow, man, must be just like Oakland. And I remember seeing this documentary, or I thought it was a documentary, called Style Wars. And it focused on the life of graph writers and people who were putting up their art, speaking about their environment through their art, and putting it on trains and buses and walls and anywhere they could do it. And then I saw this movie called Wild Style.
Woo!
And I started meeting all these different characters who had all this confidence, have to be. And it seemed like they came from an environment that didn't have a lot of resources, but they were living on top of the world. And I remember them talking about their craft with so much passion that I adapted that energy when it came to my craft and applied it to everything I did, whether I was studying sciences or playing basketball or football or running track or even becoming a poet or what I thought was to be a poet and writing in my book and trying to draw. And I remember these two kids, one that went by the name of Mayor, who I thought, wow, these guys got a lot of flair. And the way they draw, to me, I had never seen anything like it. The uniqueness of it all. And another one that goes by the name of Say City, a.k.a. Say Adams, who's here with us today, who was featured in that movie as a youth and has gone on to do some incredible work. And it's the kind of work that we don't hear enough about when we talk about the icons in hip-hop, because without this kind of work to accompany the ideas and the concepts, without the visuals, we couldn't necessarily have brought them to life. So when you think of artists like DMX, when you think of artists like Jay-Z, when you think of artists like the Beastie Boys, when you think of artists like Third Base, when you think of artists like Redman, when you think of artists like EPMD,
wow,
when you think of artists like Method Man, when you think of artists like Public Enemy, these artists, when you think of artists, did I say the Beastie Boys?
Yep.
Okay, then it's deserved to be said twice. And the list goes on. When you think of companies like Def Jam and you see those logos that accompany all the music that they've been able to put out through these days and through these years and through these decades, you cannot have any of that if you didn't have the creative brilliance of the one and only Say Adams, who's with us today. His work has been shown at the Brooklyn Museum, the Museum of New York City, MoMA, One Nation work that he's done for the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. He's an author of the book, The Mashup, Hip-Hop Photos Remixed by Iconic Graffiti Artists. Ladies and gentlemen, Say Adams. Say Adams. Say Adams is here.
Wow.
My brother.
That is easily the most impressive introduction I have ever heard connected to the work that I've done over the years. Thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely, man. Your work has been in the fabric of my DNA. You helped teach us, unbeknownst to you. I think you were just doing what you did passionately out of love.
Yeah. I mean, I often say that the work that we do as creatives is behind the curtain so that the performers can shine. But after all these years, it's time for us to step up and take a bow because, as much as I hate to say it, I love my, hip-hop brothers and sisters, but they never turn, the camera or the microphone in the other direction. It's always me. And so, that was why I wrote the book Definition, the art and design of hip hop, to shine a light on photographers and illustrators and graphic designers and the whole graffiti community that is a part of this thing called hip hop.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, round of applause. I like the applause today. I like it. I want to go back for a minute before we move forward, okay? When you were approached about Wild Style, what was it? How was it described to you? What did you think it was?
Back then in the early 80s, first of all, there were not a lot of people of color hanging out on the scene downtown anyway. I mean, certainly you had a lot of people in the Bronx and then Queens, where I come from. But, downtown Manhattan, there were not a lot of people that looked like me. Jean-Michel was there. Fab Five Freddy was there. Michael Stewart was there, rest in peace.
Keith.
Yeah, and certainly Keith Haring was there. But there were not a lot of people that looked like us. So when I had an opportunity to try to navigate those waters, I was really just trying to have my voice heard. I was trying to figure out how I was going to take my graffiti skill and take it to the next level and do something positive with it, because I knew that eventually, you get caught, you get arrested, it's a problem, and everything goes left from there. So for me, I was really just trying to figure out how to channel that energy into something that I could build on.
Really? Did you ever have, at that time, reservations about the growth of your artwork becoming commercialized? And back then, that whole sellout stigma was huge in the community and the culture.
It was, but I know where I come from, and there was nothing behind me. So for me, and this is what I tell people all the time about the difference between hip hop and punk rock, is that, they're both rebel music, but we weren't laying on the sidewalk rolling around, with a dog with a sign in our hands. We were trying to shine and make it look like we had something before we had something. So, I was doing the same thing. It's like, I'm trying to get somewhere, and whatever I have to do short of, getting in trouble, I'm going to do. And if that means working with a corporation that's going to help keep the lights on, let's do it.
Let's do it. You met Russell Simmons, and that was a pivotal point, I would say, in your career. Not really knowing who Russell would become, because Def Jam didn't even exist at the time you met Russell Simmons. Right. He was just doing Rush management, correct?
Right, correct.
And who were the groups he had under Rush at that time?
Wow, you really are going to put me to work.
Okay, well, I know he had Run DMC, the Beastie Boys,
right. Curtis Blow,
yep.
Houdini, Jimmy Spicer, Dynasty and Mimi, and Dynasty was Ecstasy's brother from Houdini, Spider D, Sparky D. It was a heavy roster. It's funny talking about it now, because so many of those names don't resonate with your contemporary audience, but. Back then it was very much like a training ground. It was like what I imagine it was like to be at Motown in the early days.
Yeah.
You learned how to do everything in that one little office, and everybody was always in that 1-2-room office, and we were all just trying to make it. When you came home from, school, or you had a little time off from your part-time job, you came down to Rush.
You came down to Rush. Did you consider yourself what did you title yourself? Was it a writer? Was it a graffiti artist? Was it a visual artist? Did people frown on the word graffiti?
You know what? Like a lot of my friends and contemporaries get hung up on all this language.
Okay.
To me, I was always an artist. If you wanted to call me a graffiti artist, great. If you wanted to call me a writer, great. I didn't care about the labels. Let's just work.
Okay.
Right, and pay me.
Absolutely. Fab Five Freddy is someone I've always looked up to, because in many ways, I think when it comes to TV, I've kind of followed his path. I followed his lead in being able to work at MTV and become on-air correspondent of truth and information. And that's who I saw him as. And he got a lot of credit for introducing or being a liaison to that downtown scene and what was going on uptown. Discuss his role in this evolution.
You know, it's funny. Fab and I were both just in L.A. for the opening of the Annenberg Space for Photography's exhibition on hip-hop photography. And we were talking about this. You know, Freddie was somebody that was a visionary even before people knew what he was doing. He just understood that, you know, what we were doing was important, and he was trying to find a way to get us to that next level. And connecting with people is what it's always about. You know, when you look at all of the, you know, the great people in hip-hop that have made things happen, you have to be a connector. You have to work with people. You can't do it all by yourself. And he understood that very early on. And he also understood the power of image. If you look at those early photographs of him, he always had his shades on inside, way before everybody else was doing it. And he always had on a cool hat. He always had on a nice leather jacket. He always looked ready for success.
Yeah.
And so I always just thought that he was somebody that was really important to the culture because he had that rapper swag, gift of gab before it had a name.
Yeah.
You know, very early on.
Yeah, he did. You guys were, you mentioned Jean-Michel Basquiat and Andy Warhol was in that time period. How close, like how accessible was Andy Warhol to all of you? And then what did he take anything from folks, or were people feeding off of each other?
You know what? I think it was an exchange.
Okay.
Andy Warhol was already a superstar at that point. And you know, depending on who you talk to, you know, his career was on the downslide. His work wasn't as expensive as it is now. He didn't have his resurgence yet.
Okay.
And he was hanging out, feeding off that young energy the same way people do to this very day. He offered a lot in terms of mentorship because he showed us where we wanted to go. He was a pop artist. Graffiti is contemporary pop art. And that was, for me, the most important thing, is to be able to, you know, really just breathe the air that he was breathing, because, you know, he had access to places that I could have never gone, whether it was Mr. Chow's or, you know, a lot of the, you know, the fancy parties. And when you were rolling with Andy, you got acceptance, even if it was just being a part of, you know, his entourage with Keith and Jean-Michel and all of them. But that was really important back then because, you know, I never had a mentor or somebody that took me under their wing, and just being able to hang out with Andy was plenty for me.
That when you see how he's portrayed in all the docs, all the movies, it seemed like he was an extremely unique, eccentric individual. Same with Basquiat, in a sense. Seemed like he might have been introverted in a sense. What were they like as people, man?
Well, you know, I mean, you can, all of this stuff is documented. You can read a lot about Jean-Michel. The one thing I will say about him is that he was insanely driven. He is driven the same way Puffy is, the same way Jay-Z is, the same way Kanye is. He wanted success by any means necessary because he was trying to change his circumstances. For whatever reason, he was driven in that way. And not a lot of people have that, where they just want it so bad, they're willing to, you know, in some ways do whatever they have to do to get it. And Jean-Michel had a lot of demons. I mean, he wasn't the sweetest guy in the world. And the funny thing about the way his image is portrayed is that people romanticize about what it would have been like to be around him. You know, he was a sweet guy at times, but he had his issues. And I sort of encourage people to read about him so you don't sort of brand him as this, you know, this godlike figure. He was just an artist that was trying to get his hustle on like everybody else.
What was the environment at that time? We were having this whole conversation about drug culture and how it accompanies entertainment or art, the art world. What was it like back then?
It was tough, and it was, it was downtown in the 70s and 80s. People were doing everything, and it was all around you. I mean,
Quaaludes,
all of it,
heroin.
But for me, I have never really drank or ever did drugs, and I think that saved me. So,
Wow.
Even back in the day when my friends were on the corner smoking weed and 3 of them would chip in on a nickel bag and, they get a quart of beer and we'd hang out on the corner and talk about...
So 3 of them on a nickel bag? What that, $1.50 a piece? Oh, God, y'all was struggling.
But, I never participated, but I never frowned on anybody, and nobody ever tried to push anything on me. So peer pressure was something that I was never, a part of. But downtown, it was all readily available, and I think that was one of the things that, sadly, a lot of my friends gave into, and it took a lot of amazing talents way, way too early, and Jean-Michel Basquiat was one of those.
We have Say Adams, a visual artist, if you will, founding creative director for Def Jam Records, if you will. I want to move into that era of the Def Jam era of Russell Simmons, and easily I would say, if you ask me who I think the greatest rapper, people like to say that a lot, I would be remiss, in my opinion, if I didn't say it was this guy I heard you speak about. Meeting him, or how you got connected with him in the first place.
Well, I was living in Brooklyn, and I saw this guy and his whole crew, and they all had these black jackets with this silver and black logo on it. And I just thought, I could really help that guy. I hope they make it. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, up at Def Jam, and Russell and Leor says, we just signed this new act, and he's gonna be really huge. He's gonna be really huge. His name is Jay-Z. And I thought, I know that guy. He's my next door neighbor. I didn't change the Rockefeller logo, but I gave Jay-Z a logo, which is the one that he still uses to this day.
I argue between LL. I put them in 2 different categories. I say LL is the greatest of all time, and I say Jay-Z is the greatest of all time. You met Jay-Z prior to him becoming Jay-Z? Or?
Yeah, well, like I said in the spot, we lived in the same building at 560 State Street, and naturally now everybody knows that address because Jay-Z made it famous in one of his songs. I think it was Empire State.
Empire State, yeah.
And Lord Jamar from Brand Nubian also lived in that building. So it was somewhat of a hip-hop celebrity hangout.
Wow. Did y'all hang out?
Yeah. We had a courtyard in the building, and we used to throw block parties there. Well, courtyard parties. And Maceo from Third Bay. I can't believe I just said. You really gonna have to edit that.
Maceo from
De La Soul was
Uh-huh.
a DJ from time to time that would come through. A lot of people that hung out downtown Brooklyn would come through there, and so we would always hang out with each other and interact. But they didn't know what I did.
Okay.
I knew what they did because, a lot of times what they were wearing was branded, but they didn't know what I did.
You talk about Jay-Z. I think visually what he's done, how his art has accompanied, conceptually his art has accompanied his music, has probably been one of the most unique processes we've seen. I mean, he's given us scavenger hunts. He's done, flip books. He's done really artistic
music
videos, the whole nine. Was his mind always working like that when y'all first started working together?
You know what? I like to believe that through some of the conversations we had, he was evolving.
Okay.
And he was always an interesting guy. He was always soft-spoken, always carried himself with dignity and respect, and he was curious. And whenever we would have creative conversations, he would never shut you down immediately. He would sort of give me the space that I needed to experiment, if you will. And if it wasn't right, he would say something. But more times than not, he would really give you that space. And I have to take a moment to also acknowledge Jonathan Mannion.
Yes.
Because as a photographer, he shot every single one of Jay-Z's album covers, especially from the early years. And we 3 a lot of times would collaborate and talk about what we were going to do. And I think that was also the thing that sparked in a lot of ways almost a revolution, because then you saw Kanye starting to really take his creativity to the next level from a visual perspective. And you have to understand that was sort of, for me, the final frontier as a creative, getting a recording artist to understand the power of visuals before it was fashionable. You really had to sell them on a lot of these ideas, because conceptual album covers was something that was not being done in hip-hop until Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet comes along.
And Fear of a Black Planet is the one you worked on.
That is correct. But a lot of that credit goes to Chuck D. And I'm sure that this. Chuck has always been a visionary. He's always been ahead of the pack, and he has never been afraid to go against the grain. So when he approaches myself and my partner at the time, Steve Carr, about this album cover, just hearing the term Fear of a Black Planet was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And all I remember thinking was, that's not a fight that I have to have with the record company. All I have to do is make sure that the creative is powerful.
Wow. Man, we have Say Adams here, and he's going to talk about the Pabst Blue Ribbon National Mural Day, which is taking place Tuesday, May 7th. And we're going to come back to this history. But what is that about, man? This is really huge.
Well, the work that I've been doing recently is sort of taking classic American brands and sort of remixing them, if you will. And the folks at Pabst Blue Ribbon saw what I was doing and realized that this was an opportunity for them to connect with our community. And for me, I think it was a long time coming partnering with them, because as a visual artist, I'm always looking for a partner that understands who we are and where we come from and has respect for our journey.
Okay.
This is a company that's been around for 175 years. So they understand about history.
175 years. So you're going to remix their logo, right?
I've
and
done
you've done it. And you've done it right here. Look at it right here. We're going to put it on camera so folks can see. And it's going to be on over 150 cans this spring. 150 million. I made a faux pas right there.
Very different number.
Wow.
All right. And that's incredible to have your work be featured on 150 million cans. And here's one of the cans right here. Are we about to drink this, dog? Oh, no, you don't. This is incredible.
I'll test it.
The one thing I will say is that working with all of the superstar artists that I have worked with over the years has prepared me for an opportunity like this. I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the greatest brands in history, some of the most prestigious museums. So when they knocked on my door, I was excited for the opportunity to partner with them, but I'm not new to this.
Yes. You say Adams. They are equally excited to be partnering with you.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yes.
I've been working very hard for a lot of years to get to where I am, and I tell people all the time, it's one foot in front of the other, one day at a time. No such thing as an overnight success. You have to be prepared. You have to do your homework. And I had to study their brand in order to really embrace the, the piece that I was making. I got to go into their archives and look at a lot of their early advertisements and use all of those things in the piece. And this is something that I'm really proud of because my name is on it.
Yes.
And this is the first time that my name has been featured on a package that is going to be in front of so many people. And the power of social media really allows people to reach you right where you are.
What was your approach? What did you want to do with the color schemes and the what like I see definition, and what was your approach?
Well, the thing that I really wanted to do first and foremost is I wanted to inject a little bit of the flavor of who we are into the package. I want young artists and designers to look at this and understand that this was created by a person of color, and all of the excuses are out the door. You can do anything you want now. All you have to do is apply yourself and work really hard. And certainly we all learned that by witnessing President Obama becoming, the first African-American president in the United States. So for me, anything that happens, I think is possible at this point. And luckily, my aspirations are really about putting all my energy back into young artists that are coming up behind me, because when I first started out, I didn't have a role model or an icon or anybody to sort of guide me. I had to make mistakes. I had to figure them out, and I sort of was just, forging my own path as I went along. But now we're in a situation where you can Google somebody's name and you can learn about their history, and you can point to all of these things and say, oh, that's what it looks like. I want to be like that person.
You speak so much about like being prepared and having a history and having the knowledge. And when you look at a Pabst and the ribbon and how long it's been around, and although you're grateful for the opportunity, as much preparation, were you nervous about kind of touching something like this?
No, never, because I know that what I'm doing is enhancing what is already there. I'm not changing anything, and that's why I referenced remixing, because in a lot of ways we all sort of understand what that is. You're taking something that's already classic and you're putting your own contemporary spin on it.
Say Adams is here. We're going to open up the phone lines. He is as important to hip-hop history as any of your favorite rappers, your favorite DJs, whoever they are. Whether it's a Jam Master Jay, whether it's a LL Cool J, whether it's a Queen Latifah, whether it's a Russell Simmons, Say Adams is just as important to our history as they are, in my opinion. 888-742-3345. Give us a call.
Yet our best trained.
Say Adams is here. Sway the Morning, Shade 45. He worked on One Nation, which is a mural-sized collage and mixed media Black American flag to commemorate the opening of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. How did you get summoned for that?
Man, I still get goosebumps just hearing the title National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been to DC, please go and see this museum. It will change your life regardless of who you are, where you come from. Go check it out. We were working on a coffee table book called The Anthology of Hip Hop and Rap, the Smithsonian presents. And it's, arguably it's a coffee table book, and it's the greatest hits collection ever assembled. So we're talking about a 9 CD box set from, the first hip hop recording in the 70s to present day. Everybody is in there. And we're doing a coffee table book with the Smithsonian. And so when they were opening the museum, I was already working with them, and they said, how would you like to make a piece on the National Mall live in front of thousands of people with the President of the United States doing the ribbon cutting ceremony?
God.
What was that day like for you?
Well, I was the only artist that they asked to make a piece of art, number one. Number two, getting supplies through Secret Service, not that easy.
Like paintbrushes, like what they
Yeah, well, they wanted to see every single thing. I had to submit lists and lists of all of my materials weeks and weeks in advance. And they all had to be cleared by Secret Service because the president was going to be, within my reach. And it was emotional, I have to say. There was a lot of camera crews, and I took a lot of selfies with people because I was making this right in front of people live over a 4-day period. And it's easily one of the most emotional things that I've ever experienced, short of my son being born.
Wow. Did you prep for it in advance, or did you come off the cuff?
No, well, I knew that I wanted to represent everybody. The toughest thing was to know that I had an image in there of the poet Sonia Sanchez,
Wow.
and she was there.
Oh.
And I still could not muster up the courage to say hello. Because I just thought, like Angela Davis, she's one of these icons that have paved the way for everybody. And she's the sweetest woman in the world. And still, I was like, couldn't do it.
Say Adams is here. CEY Adams. Look him up if you don't know.
Say, for all the parents that listen to the show, what would you say to them that have these kids that my kid is always drawing, my kid is always writing, can't focus in school, they just got books and stuff all. What would you say to those parents that's not really been supportive so far?
I think that we live in a good time now. I think that they can see the future. There's so many art programs out there that can help their students or their children get to the next level. And so I think that it's important to be supportive because, like a lot of rappers, you're not following a traditional path, but there is a road to success. And if you value hard work and creative process, eventually it will bear fruit, as long as you don't want to be an overnight success. And, that stuff fizzles out anyway. I mean, you can name so many rappers that you loved in the 80s and they can't get arrested now.
Oh, my gosh. I'm dying.
But I didn't name names. Right?
Wow. Say, can you share a bit about how you determine what your price point will be, how much you get paid?
Wow, you're tougher than him. Wow. You know what it is? We'll use paintings for an example. I've been making work since the 80s. I have built up a clientele. So, I think about how much time I put into something. I think about the 50% cut that my, gallery or my dealer is going to take. I think about
That's real.
all of the work that I've done to get to that point. So I'm not just pulling a number out of the air. It's based on, a long history. And I'm also thinking about the fact that if you go too high and you get somebody to purchase that piece, but then you need other collectors. You can't just live off one sale. And you have nowhere to go but down after that. So if your work stops selling, everybody that bought your pieces, it's garbage. It's not like a sweater. Paintings, grow in value. And if eventually they start to lose their value, everybody's going to feel like they got cheated.
Oh.
So that's why they tell you, if you buy a piece of art, buy it because you love it. Because there's no guarantee that that artist is going to continue to make work, and there's no guarantee that the value is going to continue to rise.
So do you and like fellow artists, creators have conversations about money?
All the time.
Right, okay.
You have to, because galleries and all of these art dealers and these handlers, they all try to hustle you. The artists are the first people that they will ask to donate something. We're artists. We're already
donating, right?
Yeah. Like, no. And I'm somebody that is very charitable. I give to all of these organizations that have their hands out because I understand how hard it is, and I come from that same place. So I want young people to have a chance, but we have to eat too.
We're going to open up the phone lines in a second. 888-742-3345. Say Adams is here.
Speaking of that, when you're a young creative artist, musician, whatever it is, and you can survive off dollar slices of pizza because you're really just so focused on the art, and you think, I can do this forever, I can live this way, I can struggle as long as I get to be creative. But there comes a point in time when you grow up and you realize that there's more to life than just being an artist or being a rapper, musician. What was that moment for you where you realized, like, wow, I really do have more going on than a paintbrush?
When my son was born in 1984, that was when the light bulb went off for me, and I said, okay, you can't be a graffiti artist / vandal anymore. You have to turn this into something that you can hold in your hand, because a baby doesn't care. And my son is 34 years old now, and I always look at him as inspiration because he's the thing that let me know that I had to change up what I was doing. Otherwise, I might have went deep into my 30s being that guy.
Slices.
Okay.
Just give me a
Raised
slice.
pizza.
Yeah, you still get a slice at 40. Buy a
Damn,
fucking
dog.
pie.
Save the
All
crust
right.
for daddy.
Carolyn is on the
dead.
line from New Orleans. What up, Carolyn? Good morning. How you doing?
Hey, boo.
Good morning, babe. Today I'm gonna be Carlin. Carlyn.
Carlyn.
How you doing?
How you doing, Carlyn?
All right. Catch your breath.
My
You
bad.
look good.
Thank you.
On the billboard.
You saw me at the
Say-
Billboard Awards, Carlyn.
Oh, did I see you? I recorded it. I stopped. I rewind. I stopped again.
Go ahead.
Oh, Sway.
You weren't single, so I kept it moving.
Do? Okay.
Being respectful.
Okay.
Being
Thank,
respectful.
thank you. You want to talk to Say?
Hell, you a slice, Sway.
And I want to, as Drake said about showing people love, when I tell you I'm 49 plus one, and I've never read my CD covers to even know about you, but loved your art. And I just thank you. And sitting at the red light from the time that you guys were talking about your past conversation about how you all are doing way more than just being DJs up there. So I commend you for everything you all do. But to bring him to the spotlight, and I bought the book for my 20-year-old son that's iPhone photographer, but had a lens back in the day, and made me now want to go to Costco and buy him a brand new camera, because unfortunately, to your point, it's not a lot of art programs anymore. The government has cut a lot of that. So you have to bring that to the kids. And I am going to have him and his friends look at your book. And I bought the new price off of Amazon because it is a little costly, but it is definitely worth it with who you are and your knowledge. And I also invite you, and I'm going to cut it short, we have reopened our New Orleans African American Museum, and we have about 3 others. I want you to come down here and sell this book and show it to the people. You need to be doing a tour with this, because it is, just from me flipping through it at Amazon.
You know what? I am going to cut you off to say you are 100% correct, number one. Number two, I'm in New Orleans a lot. I just did a mural at the Homer Plessy School in the French Quarter.
Yay!
Go check it out. But honestly, if you need me, reach out to me. You know,
I will
it
definitely
didn't
let
take
both
me
of
being
them-
on this show. All you have to do is Google my name, and I will be there. I will stop for anything, work it into my schedule, because this is my mission at this point in my life. Everything is about arts and education.
Amen.
I spend
Yes.
so much time trying to connect with young people because I want them to understand that I had to figure it out for myself, but I want to be a resource to help them get to the next level. So I'm putting the ball back in your court.
There it is. And I'm gonna write down your number too, Carlyn. But you on social? Say, what's your social media?
Instagram is Say Adams, one word, CEYADAMS. And same thing at Twitter. My website is sayadams.com.
Following you now.
And that's what Google is for. Just hit me.
Okay, hit him, Carlyn. You're a citizen, okay?
Sway in the morning. Thanks for being a supportive parent. That's awesome.
And love the work you're doing in the community, okay?
Yeah.
And thank you for recording me. You can look at me anytime you want on that recording,
Oh my gosh.
Carlyn.
Dry off, Sway.
I'm just saying. She saw me on the carpet. Say, we weren't doing the carpet back in the day.
No, we
weren't
were not.
even walking the damn carpet back in the day.
We wasn't invited.
We weren't invited. Now we running the carpet. Say, damn it. It's I want to say your name correct. Is it Hey Mas from San Diego?
James.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Oh, Q spelled
That's
it
close.
wrong.
They say H's for J's down here.
Okay. That's what I thought it was. He missed. All right. Anyway, go ahead. You want to make a comment?
Yeah, man, this was a great segment. I'm a visual artist myself. I'm on my way to my 9-to-5 in-house, kind of in that creative block. I'm sure you know about that, Say. And this was just so super motivating. I can't even talk right now. I'm excited. Super motivating and just a great words. I definitely agree with the previous caller. You need to be on the road with this. You could inspire so many creatives that unfortunately didn't know your work.
Well, the thing
just-
about being creative is that, I sat behind a desk, and now we're at this stage where, I lecture and I travel around the country, but, I'm not in a band. It's hard to be in every single city. But the truth of the matter is, I'm always game to come to town, whether it's to paint a mural or to do a workshop. I really lend my time and energy to, being a vehicle for the history of the culture. At this point, like a lot of my friends, I'm an ambassador. I've been around long enough, and I want people to understand our story.
James mentioned he's a digital artist. When technology became a big tool in how people created art, some people frowned on it. They felt like it was a crutch, a pacifier, and then some people embraced it. What was your take on it?
Well, because I was at Def Jam and we were making designs that had to be printed, when the printers got computers and they were outfitted to with all of the latest technology, we had to do that as well. And that was how we sold it in at the company, because they didn't want to spend the money. They just thought, oh, why do we need to spend tens of thousands of dollars on computers? And I says, well, we can't print the designs out because they have them up at the big record company. And so they gave in and they gave us the money we needed to start our design studio.
Okay, Say Adams is here. James, thank you, man. You're a citizen.
Let's wait in the morning.
Thank you, man.
All right, I'm gonna take one more call. Raven in Atlanta. What's up, Raven?
Hey.
How you doing? This is Robin in New York, actually.
Damn it.
How you doing? How you doing?
Damn, oh.
That's how you spell it, though.
Okay,
Robin.
Robin. Okay, good. My bad.
Robin. Oh yeah, I've seen you many times in the city, man. I just want to say thank you. Your whole show is doing great. Every day I'm listening, and your interviews, they're getting better and better who you're bringing on. I just want to say that, far from more.
Thank you, man. We're just reaching for the stars, man.
We're just starting out.
We're just starting off.
Yeah.
We it's a new thing for us, Robin, so appreciate it, though. Go ahead.
But putting Say Adams, I'm a guy, I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, and just listening to him, it's phenomenal. To you bring someone on that you don't get to see all the time, that's not in the spotlight, and listening with the points he's making, stuff like it's not overnight success. It's one day at a time, and they're putting in the work from that many years. It's really, really nice to hear stuff like people doing this,
Wow, thank you, man. And we appreciate it. And we're going to continue and try to get better and better at this thing, man. You're a citizen, family.
Sway in the morning.
All right. Make sure you follow Say on his social, too. Man, we only got so much time, but I asked Say earlier because this is our first time really talking, although we've crossed paths for decades. And by the way, I want to shout out my sister Carmelita Sanchez. And she told me about the first time she met you. You guys sat and had dinner. Let me I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna see if you remember this. Hold up, Carmelita is the first lady of the world famous Wake Up Show with King Tech and myself, and she was very instrumental in putting the glue together and keeping us organized and help us really expand our brand throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. She said she sat down at the Paramount Hotel with you and Matt Dillon.
Damn.
Oh.
Back in 88.
Ago.
Okay, cool. All right, but anyway, she told me.
No, but I mean, certainly, she's front and center in my mind because we have a lot of friends in common. So, like a lot of the folks that were there in the early days, when I hear her name, it's only good things. And she's definitely one of those people that would check you very quickly if you were off.
You know Carmelita well. Say Adams is here, and you said something really interesting I was going to ask you about earlier in the conversation, and this will be my last question. You separated your passion for graffiti from your passion for hip-hop. And many would say, well, isn't graffiti and hip-hop of the same?
Sure.
Okay, so
I'm somebody that I hate that people feel like they have to make a distinction.
Okay.
I really do not understand it. I know that, if you break it down, graffiti is a form of art, the same way hip-hop is a form of music. What difference does it make which came first, the chicken or the egg? It's all young people expressing themselves. Stop with all the debates. Let's get down to making stuff that we can hold in our hand. What's the point? What is that argument about? I was listening to, disco when I was working back in the 70s before hip-hop came about. Me too. But so what? Or I was listening to, soul and R&B. So what? Like, why does it have to be a debate? Everybody gets on their little, hip hop soapboxes and they want to, fight for their argument about what's more important. What's more important is the art form, is the work. That's what I want to put my energy into, not, some timeline about where graffiti sits on the timeline and where hip hop sits on the timeline and breakdancing. For what?
Okay. Say Adams. And then lastly, you mentioned Pharrell. We mentioned Jay-Z. I remember back in 2004, 2005, I got on a plane with Swizz Beatz. And he was really passionate. Like, he was teaching me about the value in art in comparison to the value of real estate and how you invest. And he was going to classes and learning more and more about art. Have you seen any of these guys' collections?
I've seen what Swiss has done because it's been advertised, and obviously the New York Times just did a big piece on it a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's great. I think that more people need to do what he's doing because he is a voice that younger people are paying attention to, and I think that we need more of that because the work that we're doing as visual artists is just as important as what the recording artists are doing, is just as important as what the dancers are doing. And I think that, we should all share in a lot of this success. And it shouldn't be one guy on the top keeping everything to himself. Spread it out. There's room for everybody to eat. And I think that Swiss's showed people that.
Absolutely, man. Say Adams, man. That's the first of the many conversations. I appreciate you, man. Hey, man.
Thank you for having me.
It was our time. Okay, May 7th is National Mural Day. Make sure you check that out. Say partnered up with Pabst Blue Ribbon. They're going to have 150 million cans available. 150 million. Thank you for your continuous contribution to the community, to the culture, man. You're a great guy, man. Say Adams.
Hashtag